film. I want to welcome Melissa Errico, and I didn't get a chance to introduce her earlier. So Melissa is a singer and actress who has performed on and off Broadway. She's also a recording artist and a concert singer. She's also written for the New York Times. She has some lovely articles about Michel Legrand in particular. And she actually has a long collaboration with him for almost a decade, starting with Amour, a musical for which she was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Actress. And together they also recorded an album, The Grand Affair. So please join me in welcoming Melissa Errico. And on the piano, she will be accompanied by Clémentine.
Round, like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, on an ever-spinning reel, like a snowball down a mountain, or a carnival balloon, like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon, like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, and the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. Like a tunnel that you follow to a tunnel of its own, down a hollow to a cavern where the sun has never shone, like a door that keeps revolving in the half-forgotten dream, or the ripples from a pebble someone tosses in a stream, like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, and the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, on an ever spinning reel, as the images unwind, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. Thanks, Mom. Oh, bonsoir. Hello, everyone. What a movie, huh? Such an enchanting movie. It's so French. And all really about seduction, yeah? I think what makes it so French is that indirection, you know, what happens with le regard, as they say, the look. Everything began with a look between a man and a woman, and an understanding and a game. Really, the game was the end itself, wasn't it? So fascinating. So they do such a wonderful job here with this film festival, finding these beautiful prints. Thank you for coming to this movie, and maybe you've come to some of the others. It was a joy to get to put it together and to be asked to do it. I thought I would just tell you a little about his music, and maybe you heard the fascinating way in which the movie was so much about one man's mind and her interest in his mind, and that beautiful use of windmills with the airplane sequence and him really not knowing what he does, what he's doing, why he does it. And the use of that song, I happen to know that the writers who wrote the English lyrics to that, it was actually called Le Moulin de mon cœur, the windmills of my heart, when it was originally written. But the lyrics that we know are the windmills of your mind, which I always thought was interesting because I was in Paris recently and everyone was talking about the windmills of my heart. And I'm like, no, it's the windmills of my mind. So it depends on where you stand. However, the use of the song is so beautiful in this American film. I happen to have spoken to Michel Legrand. I did work with him on Broadway, and I got to know the Bergmans. And one thing that Marilyn Bergman said that where some of the lyrics came for her was she was lying about to have an operation, and she was about to go under anesthesia, and she saw a light spinning right over her head. And for her, a lot of the lyrics had to do with consciousness and a stream of consciousness that unfolded as she wrote that poem. But it was interesting that anesthesia for her was the stimulus. And so it could really mean anything. As I was talking to Michel, I was quite personal with him as we made an album together called, in honor of this movie, Le Grand Affair. I remember talking to him about insomnia and feeling like that song could be what an insomniac feels. You know, their life flashes before them, and late at night, everything becomes kind of irrational. So I thought I would just share with you a little bit of my thoughts about the songs. We can talk after. I'm going to sing one more song for you, and then if you have any questions about his music or his nature, I'd be happy to tell you anything I know about him. For those who don't know Michel Legrand very well, he did pass away in January and was one of the great songwriters, possibly as great as any Tin Pan Alley or great American composer, or composer that will last forever, I believe. These are standards. He had the ability to write a standard, and even though he was a modern composer. And I think also what makes him so fascinating, and Clementine Guinchat is a wonderful partner for me tonight. She's trained at the Conservatoire where he trained, and he was a classical musician. She is a classical musician. But you can hear, if you're a classicist, you will hear Ravel, Fauré, you will hear all the classical French music and the chanson tradition, the Frenchness of him, but then there is the impact of American jazz He loved Cole Porter. He loved the standards. He loved American jazz. And what makes Michel Legrand so unusual is that all these forms, from classical music to jazz to even, he wrote for ballet, he wrote for everything, but the classical, the chanson, the very French, and the American jazz all coming together. Jacques Demy and Godard, they were the Nouvelle Vague directors and so on, they all loved American movies. And they loved American jazz. And so you hear all of this swirl in his genius. So just keep, as you heard it tonight, so there's that jazz, there's that delirious French, sexy writing. So this next song, and the only other song I'll sing tonight, I noticed tonight occurs constantly. It is the propulsive melody of the entire film. It's the melody of His Eyes, Her Eyes. Did you notice how often it recurred? His eyes, da-da. Well, I'll sing it for you now. But it's a fascinating song, and so much about that idea of the French seduction, because it really was happening there while they were playing chess, and then ultimately not playing chess. So to quote the movie, Clémentine, you are such a wonderful pianist, by the way. We just met the other day, and we've been practicing over the internet for weeks. I shared with Clémentine, I shared with her many demos I made with Michel, so she would hear his classic pianistic styles, so that she didn't feel it had to be a jazz concert of any kind, but could have her own influences. So I sent her demos, and she studied that, and she listened to our album, and so it's been a joy, and she works here at FIAF, and is that how you say it? Do you say that? Yeah. So it's wonderful to bring her to the stage. So hopefully you'll all have her back many times, because she's a secret here in the building. Okay, this was a song you heard all throughout the night, and one of his great songs. So to quote the movie, let's play something else. His eyes, her eyes, is move. Her move. Is it now or never? Heaven, Eden could be theirs forever, for his eyes and her eyes are yours and Clémentine, Misha. I have to admit, this is my most favorite music in the world. So, do you have any questions about? I know I sort of did a little windmills of my mind dialogue between the songs. We're all just here because we're interested in his music, his films. Is there anything you'd like to ask me about working with him, or and if anyone?
Did he know Jean-Gilberto? Jean-Gilberto, we just lost.
Oh, he must have. I thought of it myself. Yes, he must have. Absolutely. But I don't know for sure. But I think the Brazilian. Yes, these are the great jazz artists of his generation. There's no doubt. I'm afraid I don't know their personal relationship, but.
Is the album available that you spoke of, that you did?
Yes, my album was produced by Phil Ramone, who also produced Yentl with him. They were great friends. And we did put it out. It's on Warner Music. It's on Spotify. It's on your phone. It's probably $11. You can order it right now with Wi-Fi. Yes, it is available. I mean, I don't sell CDs anymore because people tell me they don't have a CD player. So there's no point. But yes, it is. Thank you. It's called Le Grand Affair. I had the wonderful experience of finishing making the album, and Michel said to me and my husband, Patrick McEnroe, he said, would you like to, Melissa, tomorrow you two have, we didn't have children, I have 3 children now. He said, do you want to go to Spain? We will fly to Spain. And we had no kids then, so we had some time. So we said, sure. We had just finished making an album with the Brussels Philharmonic. If you do hear the album, it's one of the great things, the great thing about the record is Michel Legrand. It is literally 100-piece symphony, like 100. One day I counted the upright bass players. There were 11. I know there's not usually that many upright bass players, in a band. So there were 11. Anyhow, it was the most massive undertaking, and I was very excited when he said, "Would you like to come to Spain? Have a holiday." We actually went to the airport. Then he took us in a little car with a little fisherman's hat on and sneakers outside the airport to get in his small plane with him flying it to Spain. I have not only been making an album with him, but I've been in that little teeny plane. It was 4-seater, and he flew it. So I wrote about that in my requiem to him, sort of the New York Times, if you'd like to read about it. But I would do anything for that man. My husband and I were looking at each other like, why are we doing this? I said, I don't know. It was very exciting. He was the most spontaneous person, the most creative person. And on those few days that we spent on holiday, all he did was practice the piano, by the way, and ask us to drive him to Andorra, where he had a concert with Chucho Valdez. And the man was almost chronically creative. So holiday with him was thrilling, but also a window into how restless he was and how much music was what he wanted all day. To eat, to swim, he wanted music. It was fascinating to know him. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How did your collaboration come about initially? Just that's a personal question. And then
yes.
About the film, the music was so beautifully
Well, how I met Michel Legrand was I actually physically met him by starring in his show on Broadway. He wrote one Broadway musical, and I had grown up with a concert pianist, a classical concert pianist father, who happens to be in the audience right now, lives right around the corner. My father, Dr. Errico, hi Dad. Well, actually, he does deserve applause for many, many things, including being the great inspiration of my life around Michel Legrand's music. He used to play it at home and all the time tell me, this is the good music. He played Chopin and this and that. He also thought that was good. But Michel Legrand was for him just something I must pay attention to. And when I was living in LA, I had done a bunch of Broadway shows and I was doing some television. I had a Hollywood manager at the time who handed me a fax one day in her office, and I took the paper and I looked down and it said, there's a new musical coming over from Paris. It's called Le Passe-Muraille. It will be directed by James Lapine, Sondheim's co-writer and director, James Lapine, with music by Michel Legrand. And I looked at this piece of paper and it was like glowing in my hand. I mean, I was raised to be excited about that. I was looking at this piece of paper and I turned to my Hollywood manager and I said, Michel Legrand wrote a musical. And she goes, I know, I love her. So, I don't know, it's not my manager anymore. So if that was the path of that kind of success, that wasn't interesting to me. I flew to New York and I met Michel in rehearsal. Not everyone was as excited that he was on Earth here, this New York Earth. I stayed at every rehearsal. I stayed after. I was so interested in what was going on in his mind. Oh, Melissa, is it okay? And that I was so interested in supporting him, and I was so excited to know him. And as previews went on, the producers were told to write more music for Melissa. That was the feedback. So during previews, he ran me down to the basement of the Music Box Theater many times and wrote some new songs for me. And that, if anyone followed or wondered, I was always carrying a magazine in the show. She was always interested in the Hollywood magazines, the Paris Match, so the equivalent. I was carrying the magazine because all my lyrics were in it. I often had new songs and I would be able to sort of look down and glance at all the new words. So we had a wonderful and exciting collaboration, not only because I revered him, but because there was so much new material and I was so game to do it. So when the show closed and we were all nominated for Tonys, that was very exciting, and we went to the party, and then we made this album, and the album was lavish. And it was lavish, it was right, it was what he wanted to do, it was his concept. And I was very grateful beyond words, and so made the album. And then in the ensuing years, I've had 3 children, and I actually redid the vocals a few times because people have asked me about the timeline. Why did it come out so late? It's only 2011 that it came out. I took some time because of the kids to get what I thought was the right balance. A lot of people felt that Michel's orchestrations, I do encourage you to buy it, only because his orchestrations are wild, like wild. Did you hear in this film how he sang with himself? He sang often. Did you notice? That was his voice. And he does all this stuff on my album. It's so fascinating. He'll go, da-ba-dee-boo-boo-bee-doo-bee-da, and 100 people will go, da-da-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and he'll do da-da-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, I'm talking like 45 flutes and 90 French horns. I mean, they're all going while he's going ba-ba-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. He did the most extravagant things on the album. He did them here tonight. So I heard that nature, that flamboyant nature. Many people said, people will never want to listen to this. Michel Legrand is too much. Apparently, a very famous singer has said that he was water over the bridge and under the bridge. Sometimes. Anyhow, in short, that's how I met him. That was the next project we made. And then I am now reissuing it this fall with the home demos and the studio demos I made with him. And you can hear him teaching me and talking to me. And it's not a ghost story in any way, but you will hear him, it's very moving to hear the voice now of someone we've lost, So I will be doing that in the fall, and I'm singing at 54 Below for the week of November 5th. So we're still together in a way. I don't know in every instance if he saw movies and then scored them, but I think in this case he saw the film and scored the movie. I don't think he ever was that kind of person where he scored it first. I'm sure there's an exception, maybe Donkey Skin or something that's more of a musical, but that's a wonderful question, and maybe we'll try to answer it next week.
Why the classical French musicians, especially here Michel Legrand, is interested or drawn towards jazz, which is basically originated from the African Americans. They had French colonies. They could have gone the other way around to the Algerian music or some other music. Why French curiosity in jazz? I'm just curious.
Success. The movies, maybe the success of the movies came there and just was also alluring. I think it was, I don't really know if I quite understand the question, like why were the French so interested in American jazz?
Josephine Baker.
Is that right?
Josephine Baker.
Oh, Josephine Baker. You think that would be the answer? Well, maybe you know, I'm not here to be a sort of music scholar, but so you think Josephine Baker was the
I think she introduced this kind of American music in Paris.
I see. Well, okay. So Josephine Baker may be one of the influences that brought it. So that's Blossom Dearie too. Wasn't she sort of beloved there and had a success? No.
Sidney Bechet.
Sidney Bechet. So you have these French singers who brought it as well. I guess. I mean, oh, that's a clarinet player. Excuse me. Okay, so this sounds like this is a pretty rich topic, you know, how this obsession began. Dad, hopefully I can answer your question.
Well,
If not, I'll see you tomorrow and get it right.
a lot of it had to do with the harmonies, the jazz harmonies and the structures of jazz, the use of the modes. That was Debussy, but you'll find it in all of the jazz musicians today. They all use the modes in that same manner. The harmonies of jazz are so complicated, and the harmonies of Ravel are so complicated. And the story goes that Ravel met George Gershwin, and they were the best of relationships between them. And Ravel said to Gershwin, "I would love to write like you." And he said, "Why would you want to be a second-class Gershwin when you're a first-class Ravel?"
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, not to forget Eric Satie was a big influence on Debussy and Ravel both.
Eric Satie, a big influence on Ravel. The harmonies of jazz are in the classical music. Yeah? Yeah.
And the French initiated so much of that.
So it all comes down to the French. You win. It's perfect.
I have a question. You were mentioning that he was composing his music. I'm wondering, have you ever had a wish that you would like him to compose for you something special?
He did. It's on the album. Thank you.
Did you ask him?
I did. What was his idea, actually? It's on the album. It's called In Another Life. And it's on my album. So that was just a special song written for the album. Yeah. And also the Bergmans were asked by Michel to write a new verse to You Must Believe in Spring, to reflect some thoughts that I had about a post 9/11 America, New York, about the devastation we'd all been through and the idea of hope being something almost more political. And they wrote a beautiful verse, when angry voices drown, when angry voices drown the music of the spheres, and children face a world that's far beyond their years, above the darkest sky, the far horizons lie, with all the reasons why you must believe in spring. So that's his trick. I'm trying to do it off the pillow. Thank thank you. So he called the Bergmans from my apartment. Ellen, you have to write the new verse for me, sir. You must believe in spring. You have to. I need it immediately. I need it. It's too short. The song is too short. And we got it maybe the next day, a fax. So I'm very blessed to be able to answer your question. So, yeah. One more maybe or two more. Yeah. Hi.
Your voice is more beautiful than ever.
Oh, thank you.
You were born to sing His Eyes.
Oh, thank you.
When did that come out? When did the lyrics come out? Because it's not in the movie, just that movie.
I only knew it as a song with lyrics. I don't know. I guess the minute the movie came out, the Bergmans were probably tasked with writing the lyrics to it. It had to be simultaneous. Yeah. It's been around, that song, forever. I have it on YouTube. I sing it and stuff, but there's not many versions out there. It's funny.
You did Joe's Pub. I think it was the first time I did.
Oh, you remember? That's funny. Thank you. Oh my God, I must have been like 23. So yeah, I sing it a lot, and I'll sing it again. I'm going to be playing it with Ted Firth, the piano. I'd be interested to hear what he does to it. One of the great jazz guys here in New York. So.
Did you work with the Bergmans as well?
Oh, I have worked with the Bergmans, and I've spoken to them even recently. I have Michel's last song he wrote with them, and I'm going to put that on the album re-release for the fall. We're going to record that in August. It's a beautiful song.
How did they come together?
That's such a good question. Oh, sorry, sir. What? That's right, the Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
Yes, can you tell us all about Jacques Demy and Michel Legrand?
Can I? No. I can't tell you all about, but I know they both loved American, films and are the creators of that sort of Nouvelle Vague movement. But no, I don't know much about their personal friendship and relationship. Only that I put a lot of their movies on because they were so successful and so interesting. And the costumes were wonderful, I thought, for some fun in the summer. No, I don't know much about it. I'm sure it's fascinating. We should all read more about them, why they met, how they met. I will make sure to learn more and more about how they collaborated and who put them together. It's a good question. Yes, sir. Maybe in the blue shirt? Yeah.
It's Michael from Paris.
Oh, hi. We've met before. We actually met at the Michel Legrand tribute at the Grand Rex. I did the tribute. Michel's amazing memorial was recently in Paris, and I was able to sing at that.
Excuse me. I know you have, when you have met Michel Legrand, you have, sorry for my English,
it's okay.
A great collection of his sheet musics.
Yeah.
And you have chosen among these scores for the album Le Grand Affaire.
Yes, I have hundreds of his songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have some anecdotes about the choice of the songs?
Why we chose the songs we did on the album? Well, when Michel came to my home with Patrick, he said, we will work for 5 days and we will see if we have, by the end of a few days or so, we will see if we have any ideas about an album to make together. And so I went around to all the great experts through his manager to collect the sheet music, and I came up with a volume that was so thick. I got the biggest binder I'd ever seen and alphabetized it, and there were hundreds of songs. And then I sat at the piano, and it took days, and Michel just turned the page and went through. He didn't remember writing 60% of those songs. And he would go, oh yeah, oh yeah, this. At other times he would see a song and just say, no. I watched almost every Streisand song just go by. No. I think he wanted Barbara to say Barbara. And but then there were songs he would stop. He would say, let's take a look at this. I think he had an idea about what suited me and what he liked about my singing. So I really allowed the choice of songs to happen sitting down together while all that work, I had done weeks of work. And I had gone to places where people wouldn't let you take a lot of the stuff. They'd let you take a few and go to a Xerox place and come back. And I had really had to work hard. I was never given everything just by Dropbox or something. And I just sat there, just exhausted in a wonderful way with all the work I'd done and just watching him turn the pages and stop. But I was so glad I'd done the work because it felt so thorough, you know. So I think what he stopped on was things that were intimate and had a purity in them and that weren't histrionic. Even though we met in a musical, he felt that there was something gentle about me, gentle in my taste, which is true. Even a song like On My Way to You, no, he said, it's too much, you know? So it was a kind of, really an intuition he had about intimate music. And then it was so weird that his idea was, Melissa, we will do an album très intime, ocean, like an ocean, you know? So he wanted 100 pieces to capture intimacy. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. I mean, I hope we can do this, you know, but he knows all the film orchestras. And I actually think that you can budget better in Europe when you use symphonic, when you do symphonies. I think there's a way that these symphonies work. So he may have known that, or I don't really know if it was a financial idea as well, but he didn't want to just do piano. We also had his wife at the time who was a harp player. We could have done a harp voice, piano voice, things like that. He wanted it très intime. He kept using the word intimate and so on. And then he wanted it to be an ocean, and he kept using that word. So the goal was to be intimate and oceanic, ultimately. One more question, maybe? I know it's getting late, and we're going to have beer and wine. Yes?
Would you consider doing a full-length concert here in the future?
I am. The week of November 5th, I just changed the program for my week at 54 Below to be Michel Legrand, because I just did a full-length concert at the Venetian Room in San Francisco, and it felt so good. And then I did the thing at the Grand Rex in Paris, and I've been singing his music elsewhere, so on my travels. So I feel maybe we did the right thing. We just released it for ticket sales, I think, yesterday. So I will be doing it. I hope you will come. And we have a beautiful script for it as well. I think that tells a lot about him, and maybe a little more about Jacques Demy if I can learn anything. Well, thank you anyway for coming to the film, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you in November. Thank you, Clémentine. Merci, au revoir.